Hi, good morning or good afternoon or good evening. I'm Diane, CEO of PartnerPath, and welcome to Technology Channel's videocast. This week, I'm going to do a rather quick recap on some of the topics that we discussed in our year-end wrap-up webinar. We had Chris Cleary with Serious Decisions and Jay McBain with Forrester on the webinar, and we were just chatting about 3 or 4 topics. And one of them we started off with was, will we ever stop talking about cloud? And the consensus was that we'll never stop talking about cloud. But the topics will change and actually become a little bit more specific. So instead of just talking cloud, right, we're starting to talk a little bit more about, is it infrastructure as a service? Is it platform and cloud? Is it a SaaS solution? So we've used to just kind of lump all these kind of different products and solutions into the word cloud, and even public and private or hybrid cloud options as well. And that kind of was just one big topic in the industry around cloud. And really the topic and the conversation went to, we will always continue to have this on-demand or subscription-based model. However, we'll start talking about it much more specifically around kind of infrastructure or platform as a service. So that was one topic that we kind of dug into in the last webinar of the year in 2017. And then we followed that along with talking about the partners and their business transformation. And have they transformed? Are they transforming? Or will they continue to transform their businesses from what we would consider a traditional resale model into cloud or on-demand business models? And Jay McBain at Forrester came up with some great data on kind of how the partners are transitioning. And he really highlighted that the larger partners that might be the VAR 500 or those kind of top 500 partners have already transitioned, and or as we call it here at PartnerPath, have bloomed a new business underneath their traditional business. So instead of necessarily kind of transitioning from and taking people that used to be kind of in the reseller business with them, from the sales guys and the support teams and their technical guys, and trying to move them into the new business, they've kind of created a division or a group that they're staffing either with some of those guys that are making the move, or with new people that kind of get the new type of business model. So the larger partners have already made the move, or and have significant amount of their business and their commitment into cloud or on-demand solutions. And then really in the mid-market, it's kind of hit and miss, right, in terms of those mid-market or those mid-sized partners, that some of them are struggling and trying to make the move towards more cloud. And it's really hard, as we've talked to many solution providers, for them to make a transition or make a fast one, because they have to make a lot of investments around new people and new processes and new technologies, as well as continue to pay payroll and keep the wheels on the bus, and to continue to grow their businesses and continue to kind of make choices around those investments. Do they invest more in cloud? Do they invest more in their own IP? Do they kind of go into managed services? And how do those different investment opportunities for partners, particularly those mid-sized ones that aren't possibly as large as the kind of the big 500. So the discussion was around these guys kind of moving or trying to. Some will make it and some won't. And then we got to the smaller partners, which was a very interesting conversation. And Jay really said they're not going to make it, which I felt was a little harsh, as you'll see if you watch the replay of the webinar, which was in December 2017. But he really said that these guys, they're small businesses, they're struggling financially. Many of them have been in business for 30 and 30 plus years. And he really said they're aging out. And they've gone through many technology changes. They've gone through maybe a couple of business model changes from a traditional hardware resale VAR into more services. And he really highlighted, and I kind of agree with him, that they're not going to make the transition. It's too much. It's too hard. Some of them will be acquired. There's a lot of M&A in that space, and some will just either pass it on to a younger member of a family. A lot of them are family-run businesses, and some of them will just kind of ride it out as a traditional business model, and then kind of sunset into their boat in Boca Raton. So it's a really hard conversation of will partners, have they already transitioned to the new kind of business models, or will they? So there's a kind of a yes on the big side, a maybe in the middle, and a no on the smaller. And I think that's going to make a lot of people panic in the vendor world, all these guys watching this our video cast on a weekly basis. Because a lot of you have that long tail of partners, right? Those that are maybe $10, $20 million businesses, those guys that have been around for a long time. And I think a lot of panic will start to ensue when we start seeing these guys really not making the transition as quickly or as effectively as we as vendors want. So in this topic, the third question that we asked in the webinar at the end of the year was, is it the vendor's responsibility to help the solution providers make the transition? And I think we had diverging opinions on this. We at PartnerPath believe, yes, if the vendor should help. We think it's a partnership, and if you can do anything to help your partners be successful, then you should. Now, we're all limited by resources, bodies, budgets, so you can't necessarily throw a ton of funds at helping your partners move. But if you can, and you can put together some business processes as well as some incentives or to help them make the transition, then that's really, we think, part of being a partner. It's not 100%, of course, the responsibility of the vendors to help their partners move. It is their business model. They can decide where to make those investments. As I said earlier, some of those partners are making investments in services or in their own IP. That's kind of a leave behind. Some are making more investments in selling to line of businesses. So all these things are pulling on your partners around kind of where do they invest in terms of technologies as well as business models. So it's not completely the vendor's responsibility. So if they're not moving, that's not up to you guys. But we really think the more you can help them, the more likely they are to be able to make that transition. And Jay and Chris had a little bit different spin on that, and particularly Jay said, you're throwing good money after bad if you're really kind of focused on those smaller partners and helping them make the transition. Because, as he said, many of them are aging out and won't make the transition and don't even want to. So out of this, in this topic of cloud, we came into really kind of a couple of things that you should do to determine who you want to invest in as a vendor around making that transition. If they have a business plan and business model, right? If they've already created some sort of recurring revenue model and kind of started to make that change in their own systems, in some of their back-end systems even, so, QuickBooks and some of the financial systems that they have to track their own revenues. If they can come up with that monthly recurring revenue model and can adopt that, that's certainly a big sign of an attempt to move, and if not, success at that. And then the plan and the executive team in place. So a lot of this has to do with, do they want to? rather than can they. And so those are a couple of the ways that you guys can evaluate which of your partners you want to invest in helping them transition their business models into cloud, or what I guess will soon be called just on-demand or subscription-based models. Again, thank you for joining us on the weekly Technology Channel videocasts, and we will see you next week with some more details on topics from our end-of-year webinar. Thanks for joining us.